Welcome to Hiraeth, the home of modern Welsh politics.
It's been a little while since we spoke to Shereen Williams, who's CEO for the Democracy and Boundary Commission Cymru, which was around the time of the proposals for the reform constituencies for Westminster elections in Wales. Since then, those constituencies have been put to the test in a general election, and now they will form the basis for our upcoming Senedd election, with 32 constituencies paired together to make 16 super constituencies. We're allowed to call them super, but we're delighted to speak to Shereen again to discuss the initial round of proposals. Hi, Shereen.
Hi. Thank you for having me back on my favourite podcast.
One of our favourite guests. Thank you very much, Shereen. Right, so start from the top. Remind our listeners why we're having these new boundaries.
So the reason we're having these new boundaries is because a piece of legislation is passed via the Senedd, and it is called the Senedd Members and Elections Act. So that proposal, act sets out that we are going to have 96 MSs, and we would have 16 constituencies. So 32 divided by 2 is 16. That's why we are pairing the constituencies for the first ever Senedd boundary review.
What initial requirements or remits were you asked to consider when you were commissioning these boundaries, and what kind of constraints were you facing?
So the biggest constraint is that we have to use the 32 parliamentary constituencies that we created in the last review that it was submitted to Parliament in June last year, and obviously it came into force in the most recent general election. So that's the building blocks. You can't be tinkering. We can't expand or reduce those constituencies. So that's sort of the jigsaw pieces. Next step is, which two jigsaw pieces do you put together? First one is that we have to consider is that you need to be able to get across those jigsaw pieces without having to leave one jigsaw into another jigsaw piece and then back in. So a very obvious one, I would say, is the Ynys Môn conundrum, where we could only pair it with Bangor Aberconwy. So that's one of the considerations. We also tried to look at trying to minimize the number of local authorities, but because we've got such large constituencies in Mid Wales in particular, that was a bit of a challenge for us. So those are the pairings we looked at. We looked at the spatial geographical links, so the physical links, road networks, etc. Communities which areas that had lots in common, as well as Welsh language. That's one of the community ties that we looked at.
So there's a couple of things I want to pick up on there. So Ynys Môn, just so everybody knows, the reason you can't put Ynys Môn with anything else is because there's no road from Ynys Môn to any other constituency, right?
You've got to take the bridge across to Bangor Aberconwy. So that was a pretty much, I think, obvious guess from the start. Even before we started our work, I think the boundary geeks out there, you would have been able to pretty much guess that's definitely one super constituency. I call them, unofficially super constituencies because they are large constituencies. It's two Westminster pairings put together.
So you mentioned there you had to use the existing 32 constituencies. So from our understanding, at some point during the next Senedd term, after the 2026 Senedd election, there'll be another boundary review. But my understanding is you'll have a bit more freedom there with how these constituencies are formulated, right?
Yep, definitely. So, it feels quite rushed, but literally after the next set of 96 MSs are voted in, we pretty much start our review. We start looking at the electoral figures, etc., and then we come up with the electoral quota, which is the number of electors divided by 16. So to find out how much each constituency needs to have in terms of elected number, and we've got a bit more flexibility than parliamentary constituencies because it's plus minus 10%. So actually, you've got 20% really to play with, because you can go between 90% and 110% of the electoral quota. So we can make more changes then, but we have to wait until that review.
I'm sure everyone can't wait. So you mentioned a few of the factors that you take into consideration. So geography, local culture, local government. Is there anything else that we should be aware of?
I think that's about it in terms of the ability to it needs to be contiguous with each other. That's the key part of it. If not, I could put Ynys Môn with Newport, but that's it is a requirement for you to be able to get around the constituency without having to leave it.
So obviously during the Westminster Parliamentary Review, you had the ability to keep certain constituencies protected, such as Honest Morn, but because you're now combining them, that's not possible. But were there any other sort of historical areas that you tried to keep together? I've noticed that Clwyd is again finally one constituency.
Yeah, well, we have reunited Clwyd, so I think some of them were very obvious logical combinations to make, but North Wales is pretty set. Once you put Ynys Môn with Bangor Conwy, the rest just falls into place. It's once you get into the mid, south, and West Wales, that's when you've got more options to go for. And really, what you do in Mid Wales then sort of sets the scene for the rest of Wales.
Some of these constituencies are exceptionally large. Was size a significant factor in the creation of these constituencies? I know. So one thing we should probably say is that the new Brecon, Radnor and Cwmtawe seat is combined with Swansea East and Neath. Now, that is a big constituencies, but it's significantly smaller than something like Montgomeryshire, Glyndŵr, Brecon, Radnor and Cwmtawe would be in a sort of old Powys seat. Was size something that really was at the forefront of your mind?
That's one of the considerations we had. I think it's always tricky with creating constituencies because there's so many things you've got to balance out. And our biggest challenge is the population density. When you think about Mid Wales, it's really sparsely populated. Even as a parliamentary constituency on its own, some of these areas are quite large. We got a lot of flack when we were doing the parliamentary review for some of these constituencies because of the size of them and how we're expanding from one part of Wales to the other part of Wales, which actually might not have much in common, other than the fact that you can get through them via road networks. And it is, but ultimately it's the limitations that we have on what we can do. The building blocks are our limits. The building blocks for this review are the parliamentary constituencies.
So again, one more here that's of interest really in that kind of area to me is the Dwyfor Meirionydd, the Montgomeryshire and Glyndŵr constituency, which now does, it extends from coast to border. It's a huge seat as well, crossing numerous local authority areas. What was the logic behind pairing those, or is it literally just you've only got so many options?
Yeah, it's the limitations of options that we've got. That's the crux of it. But what we're looking for is for people to tell us, actually, if you paired, if you came up with a different combination, what we're asking people for, don't just come up with a different combination for the area you're interested in. Try and map out the rest for us and see if that works. And if it works and there's logic to that combination, then please let us know.
Yeah, because I'm sure the question a lot of people will ask is, okay, so you're going to put Dwyfor with Montgomeryshire, why not Dwyfor Ceredigion?
If people feel that's a better fit, that's fine. Tell us why they feel it's a better fit, and then
try and work out something to do with the rest of Pembrokeshire, right? Yeah.
I tell people, creating constituencies where regardless how big or small they are, you're given a picture and you have to cut up the jigsaw pieces and make sure they fit and they make sense. And sometimes there will be some pieces that just get created because they're left behind, and that's what's left, and that's what you get. You can't get a perfect map or constituency boundaries across the whole country.
Another area that people will ask about, and it's possibly the bit of the jigsaw that is the easiest thing, I suppose, is the cities being kept together, and Cardiff especially, because Cardiff will have two constituencies. Why was the choice made to put East and North together and not, say, East and South?
So in terms of, we looked at road links, we looked at how it looked on a map as well. We looked at the networks between the two and how closely they were linked, and that was the combination we came up with. But if the people of Cardiff East don't want to be paired with the people of Cardiff North and would prefer to be with another area, we take that into account. This is just literally, this is the starting point. These aren't set in stone. The whole point of having our 4-week consultation is to listen to people and say, actually, I don't think West, South and Penarth works. Let's come up with something else, because, maybe they don't like each other. Maybe they have nothing in common. I've heard that before. and that, maybe we've got more joint projects with our neighbours across the next constituency. So that's the kind of information that we're looking for.
Well, as as a resident of Cardiff East and as a former resident of Cardiff North, I have no issues with anybody in Cardiff North. Okay, so what are the next steps for these boundaries? Who can submit suggestions? Will the Senedd need to vote on these constituencies?
No, anyone can submit representation. So you can do it to us via email, via a consultation portal. You can write to us via post. That's not a problem. And what we want to hear from you is, do these combinations work? Why? Do they not work? Why? Have you got a different name you prefer? That is going to be really, really interesting. Please give us names, because we were we thought, you know what? Let's just combine names as a starting point, and people can give us their input. So this is the first chance. So they've got 4 weeks to write to us, and then we're going to look at all this information, sift through the evidence we receive, come up with revised proposals towards the end of this year, and there's another 4-week consultation then, and then we create our final set of recommendations. That final set of recommendations will not be debated by the Senedd or changed by the Senedd. It goes through on the automaticity rule, so it's implemented automatically in the 2026 elections.
I mean, one question that a lot of the politicos who listen, and I'm sorry to say, a lot of our listeners are quite, politico-y. Will the political parties now have any input on how these boundaries work, or will they have to submit representations as individuals?
What we saw in the previous review is that parties usually will tend to submit a party response, and then individual members can submit individual responses, individual MSs and politicians can submit their own representation. Residents can submit their own representations as well. And, it's not an issue. We will listen to everyone's input. However, we can't consider potential election results, past election results. What we want to see is actually facts and representations about what connections are there between the constituencies.
Just so we're clear for the listener, when can we expect the final proposals? And again, I suppose it depends on the representations you get, but can we expect wide-ranging changes, or are there only so many pairings that can reasonably occur?
There's just so many pairings that can be made on these. Some pairings are fixed. I mean, if you're going to write to me and say, I can somehow get from Ynysmon to Gwynedd, then okay. I'd like to see that happen. But there's a limit in terms of how much flexibility and changes we can do, because every change has a domino effect across the whole country. So that's really important. But I think names will be very big. People feel very strongly about names. I've already had people write to me, friends and colleagues saying, I think this name should be more, we should use this name. If you do this, I think you should use that name. And I said, well, this is how we're going to do it at the start. Please send us your suggestions for names in the future.
So whilst we're on names, there is the naming convention that you try and get a single name where possible. How many constituencies do you think that will be possible in?
We've proposed a few, but the thing with names is somebody might have a better single name for Swansea, West and Gower, for example, that we don't know about. Or, we've got a few, I think, in terms of Clwyd, Bangor, Conwy and Ynysmon. That's a nice, long, single name. And this is not a competition. Please don't think this is a competition to send us the longest name possible. So we think, if you've got a nice, succinct name, single or bilingual, please let us know about it.
Again, so when can we expect the final?
We expect to publish our final proposals. Our deadline is that it needs to be published by the 1st of April next year. So we're expecting it to be ready by end of March next year. So we've got a really short time scale. It's only 9 months really to deliver the whole review.
Well, we haven't got really that long before the next election themselves, have we? We are staring down the barrel of 18 months away. Shereen, thank you again so much. But of course, we always have a final question for you, which is, are you finally going to call the new Ceredigion constituency Ceredigalon?
I look forward to receiving representations on that matter. And then that's a matter for my commissioners to decide. I'm just an official.
Shereen, as always, such a pleasure. If people want to find maps and reports and information about the proposals, where can they go?
Just head over to the DBCC website, dbcc.gov.wales, and you can get all the information you need there. It'll direct you to our portal as well for the consultation.
Fab. And social media-wise, where can we find you and the Commission?
We are on X, on Insta, and on Facebook.
Fabulous. Thank you very much, Shereen. It's, as always, a pleasure. If you've enjoyed what you've heard today, please don't forget to find us on all the socials at Hiraeth Pod. You can go to our website, www.walespolitics.com. And thank you so much for supporting us with your ears. But if you would like to do so with your wallet, you can go to www.patreon.com/Hiraeth Pod.
Thank you for listening to Hiraeth. If you like what you heard, please don't forget to subscribe, rate and review.